Hi, I'm Femi OK. The tale of Venezuela's upheaval is a riddle with twists and turns, but what about the people who've been doing the reporting? Today, the stream hosts a roundtable of journalists to explore the challenges they've encountered. But first, here's our digital producer, Malika Bilal.
As we often see in Venezuela, the country's political divides are being drawn in a battle over hashtags. Well, supporters and critics of the government are using social media to accuse each other of creating chaos. And I want to draw your attention to two hashtags in particular that we noticed today. Well, supporters of President Nicolas Maduro are using this hashtag, which translates to peace over terrorism, to label the opposition protesters as violent. On the other hand, here's a hashtag from the opposition, Venezuela against repression and murder, which is accusing the government of doing the same. Now, while those are some of the perspectives online, Al Jazeera's John Holman is on the border of Venezuela in Cucuta, Colombia. He sent us this.
We're at the Simón Bolívar Bridge that marks the border point between Venezuela behind us and Colombia. And migration officials here say that there are tens of thousands of Venezuelans passing every day into Colombia. Now, some of them are leaving forever. We met an ex-government official that worked under former President Hugo Chavez, and he said, "We thought that we could change things. We thought that everything would be different, but they fooled us." And he's now leaving just with his passport in his hand and a couple of suitcases, which is all you can carry really across a bridge in which cars are now banned. Other people are just leaving for the day. They're trying to find the medicine and the food that they just can't get in Venezuela. There's chronic shortages over there. We met a man who had a suitcase full of nappies, and he was buying them for his upcoming baby that he was about to have with his wife. He said, "If I bought these in Caracas, the capital where he lives, I would have had to have queued for about 2 days." Now, around those many necessities, there's grown a small army of people that are trying to serve their needs. There's many porters that are helping people carry stuff across the bridge with small trolleys. There's people selling coffee. There's people shining shoes. There's one man that we met that's buying gold and jewelry from cash-strapped Venezuelans. And there's also dozens of people really that are buying hair from women who have literally nothing else to sell. And that hair is then cut off small houses and makeshift salons that are just round the corner from the bridge here. So this has really evolved this bridge into a small world in which desperation on the one hand meets opportunity on the other as the Venezuelan crisis deepens.
So many stories coming out of Venezuela right now. Joining us today with many more, Melanio Escobar. He is a journalist and chief director of Redes Ayuda. That's a human rights organization in Caracas, Venezuela. Also in Caracas, Andrea Hernandez. She's a photojournalist for the online news site El Estimulo. And Aitor Saez is a journalist based in Colombia. He joins us from Bogotá. We also reached out to several other journalists from Telesur and the Ministry of Information, but they didn't respond to our requests. Let's get started though, Andrea, with this idea of if you're watching the news in Venezuela, what do you get to see? What do you get to hear? What do you get to read?
Actually, it depends. I mean, if you see television, there are channels, but they don't portray the truth. You always, or most of the time, you need to go to social media, for example.
What do you mean by they don't tell the truth, Melanio? Do you think you can just expand on that a little bit?
Well, like Andrea says, it's very hard to see on the television, on radio stations, like the traditional ones, what is happening on the street, because there's a huge censorship provided by the government with a lot of threats against the media, and they have on so many others. So when you turn off the TV and you want to see what's happening on the street, you are not going to see a protest. You are unable to see what's happening on the lines to get food, or what's really happening on the hospitals and with the medicine chaos that we have in Venezuela. So people are attending to get the news on social media, through Twitter, through Instagram, through Facebook. It's where people are getting the news that they need to get really informed what's happening in Venezuela. And that's why our work gets so relevant, and that's why people are following us on Twitter or following us on Instagram, and whatever social media we try to use to to inform people. That's why so many people are following us, because there's no real information in traditional media.
Sorry, it's true what
the last.
It's true what Andrea and Melanio say, that traditional media, especially TV, are controlled by the government. But it's also true that in the social media there are a lot of noise information, maybe videos or images from 2014 protests. And then as a journalist, we have to be very, very careful with that information, what is true, what is false. And it's difficult right now to cover Venezuela because of that.
You know, it's interesting you say that, Aitor, about it being difficult to be a journalist in Venezuela right now, because we're hearing that from other journalists online who are weighing in on this conversation. This is Lorena, and she's a journalist at El Universal in Venezuela, and she talked about some of the biggest challenges that people like her face. Have a listen to what she said.
Estos son tiempos muy difíciles para el periodismo venezolano. Los periodistas han sido detenidos. Muchas veces se les obliga a borrar el material que captan en sus cámaras de los eventos que se registran en Venezuela. También han sido acosados, golpeados, han recibido heridas de perdigones, han sido instigados no solamente por policías y militares, sino también por la misma población civil, bien sean del gobierno, bien sean de la oposición. El periodismo está muy expuesto en este momento. A los periodistas les hacen responsable cuando los dueños de los medios para los cuales trabajan no publican los contenidos, y esta censura recae prácticamente en el periodista que está en la calle.
So Melanio, she talks about being beaten, being harassed, facing daily threats. Are those things that you can relate to? I know that you had friends who were among the protesters and they faced some of those things and then left the country. Can you relate to her video comment at all?
Yeah, that's something that is really happening. I mean, I received daily threats about the work that I do through social media, to anonymous calls to my phone. I mean, that's something that's really happening. I mean, look, people are really stressed about the situation and the context of conflicts in Venezuela. And when they don't see represented in the television, in the radio, they get so frustrated. And sometimes they can use that frustration and express against journalists in the field of work. When you are covering the protest, you are not only like, menaced by the repression or menaced by the situation, that you are menaced with something else. That's the frustration of the people, that they are not getting information through the channels that we're used to get the information. So it's very hard to be a journalist right now. We are very exposed.
And there's something very interesting also regarding threats, that we receive them from both parts. We receive them from the government and from the people, that the demonstrators. For example, I've received, I've been hurt by rocks, but thrown by demonstrators, but I've also been hurt by tear gas bombs thrown by.
And Aitor, what were you going to say as well? Go ahead, Aitor.
Yeah, in that sense, it's true that the main aggressions are happening in the Chavista neighborhood. So for a journalist, it's very difficult to enter in a Chavista neighborhood during a protest. And then even if the journalists want to be neutral and show both parts, it's quite difficult, because you cannot get the access, and then you have to be with the opposition demonstrators, and then the information that you provide, it's already not neutral.
I want to show audience you this video that Melanio shot from a high up position looking down on the National Guard. Let's have a look at this.
¡Sonríe! ¡Que te estamos grabando!
So Melanio is shouting, "Smile, I'm recording you." Melanio, you're recording the National Guard because...
I was like, "Smile, we're recording you," because they were attacking to the buildings, you know, and that's something that is illegal. And in that moment, I wasn't a journalist. I was a member of civil society that was getting attacked by the National Guard without a reason. So I got out of my side, you know, because I needed to record that just to make the denounce. Some people doesn't believe this as much as I do, but the tweets of today are going to be the evidence of tomorrow. So that recording can show how National Guard shoots directly to residents with tear gas, where all people live, little kids live, and they all were suffocated by the gases. So, I mean, this is very important to record and to denounce and to propagate on social media, because it's nothing good what they are doing.
You know, I love that line. I had to write it down, that these tweets will be really tomorrow's history. Merida here, though, brings up something that he thinks some journalists in Venezuela might have to deal with. He says, as a Venezuelan man in Venezuela, I strongly condemn the media's self-censorship, for all it does is contribute to a false picture of peace. He goes on to say most media outlets, and I'm talking about the ones that aren't the property of the government or with a pro-government point of view, often don't cover events that could cause discomfort to the government. Andrea, this is actually a perspective that we've gotten from a few people who say there's self-censorship running rampant. People do it because they're afraid. Have you faced that?
Well, I try not to self-censor myself, because then I'm not doing my job. It's extremely important that I say everything that I can about what I'm seeing. But for example, I do censor myself regarding children in protests, because it's illegal to publish photographs of children in political acts.
I want to share with you a story that Aitor filed not too long ago, about a month ago. Have a look here on my laptop. I will not bring a child to suffer. We talk to Venezuelans who are sterilized by the crisis. Aitor, this feels like it's an extreme story, and it gives people a sense of what is going on in Venezuela and how Venezuelans reacting to these historic moments. Tell us more about this story that you filed and the thinking behind it.
Yeah, I think that the international journalists, especially, we are covering like food shortage or sanitary problems, but there are the second problems, the consequence of all that crisis that we have to explain. One of that was this story of the increase of women that are sterilizing themselves, cutting their fertility in order, because they cannot afford a new child. And they were really young women, 23 years old. And for me, it was really shocking that a woman must cut her fertility because of the economic situation. So I think it's important for international journalists, especially, to see the consequence of all that crisis. Yeah.
So you mentioned international journalists.
Exactly.
We actually got a comment from someone else who mentions them and says that the focus from many journalists is on the wrong thing. So this is a comment from Lennon Mori. He's a political science student who was trained as a journalist. He's from Caracas. This is what he had to say.
Thanks for having me. The situation in Venezuela is very complex, but isn't near to the picture that most of the international media are trying to sell. Venezuela has 335 counties. Protests are happening in around 10 or 15 of those. We are talking about less than 15% of our territory. Having said that, we have to admit that right now Venezuela is going through an economic crisis. The same very few people who clash every day against National Guard are generating chaos, confusion, people getting hurt or even killed, are attacking those medias which very recently were the very best friend of them. So media have to try to tell the whole story from both sides.
Melania, do you agree with his point? I mean, it seems to say that he seems to be saying that some of this has been exaggerated. The international media is blowing things out of proportion. This isn't all over Venezuela. What do you make of that?
It's not an exaggeration, and using like persons to calculate the discontent of the people in Venezuela, it's actually wrong, because if you see history, when Martin Luther King gave that "I have a dream" speech, he managed to come to get 250,000 people in Washington. And that was like, I don't know how much percent, but in the country were like 200 million people. I mean, it was a small portion of the people that were with him in that moment. And when you see the 80,000 people that Gandhi managed to gather in that huge protest, that historical, it was, it'll beat people of the civil society. So you are seeing in this 88 days of protests, more than 1,000 protests in all the country. I mean, it's a very huge movement. So the discontent is not small, and the media is not picturing things like exaggerating. The thing is even worse that the media is covering, because the media doesn't have the time, the paper, and the resources to cover all the consequences of the problems that is happening in Venezuela. Like Aitor said, it's not only that there's no diapers on the stores, it's there's no vaccine for little kids, there's no milk, there's no a lot of situation that is very bad for families. So people are deciding not to have children and sterilize the women just to not face that situation in the near future, because people cannot afford a house, cannot afford a rent. So bringing a child in this situation, it's a very bad idea for most of the people in Venezuela. So it's not
sorry, Melania. I have to disagree with Melania, and I think Lenin has a part of reason, because yeah, it's true that you have a protest and 2 streets away you have people in a restaurant, but that happened with all the countries and with all the protests, and the media has an agenda that less or more has to follow. I mean, for example, for my Spanish media, I don't want to criticize, but when I try to sell some stories for them, like more deep stories, they don't want yet these stories. They want just protest, because the
images
agenda
are very dramatic, so they're going for the dramatic images. Aitor, what would you like to share with them? What's one story where you feel, I really need to tell them this story?
Yeah, for example, I would like to enter and to get access with the colectivos, that are the parapolitials of Chavista. I think very interested how they are organized, what are the objectives. I think that's the work that the journalists must have, but we cannot do, because it's difficult to enter.
You know, Femi, you read the mind Femi read the mind of our community, because she asked that question to you, Aitor. We also got this from in Venezuela, this tweet from someone who says, is there a news story that you wish the international media would pick up on? What has the international media done well or not done well in your perspective? Andrea, I'll give that one to you. What do you wish people would report more on?
I agree with Aitor. He is saying that he would like to go with the colectivos and have that access, but Melanio enumerated, he enlisted the problems that we as journalists have here in Venezuela, but he forgot access, and that's the most important one regarding colectivos and also the demonstrators that are on the front line. I've been having a lot of problems with these frontline soldiers, if I can call it like that, because they believe that they are soldiers of the resistance. And they don't want us to take pictures, not too near, because we may show their faces, their eyes, or something that the police here could use to identify them.
Andrea,
so
you sent us 2 pictures. Andrea, you sent us 2 pictures from your work today. I want to share them with our audience, so people can know how do you do it? Where are you? What's your challenge? So here's one of the pictures here. What's happening here?
Okay, so here we were being bombed with tear gas from the National Guard, and I saw these formations with, how do you call these? I don't know, these pieces of wood. They were protecting themselves with them.
Shields, yes.
And they were, exactly, they were protecting themselves with that, and they had like a sort of a rudimentary military formation.
And this picture here?
Yeah, those were women fleeing from the tear gas. That's an elder woman. And she was being consoled and helped and guided by the other younger one.
There's also a story that you're not getting out that I know you want to tell, which is about the women going to the protest, the women in the protest. Again, here's another one of your pictures. It's almost like you don't even need to hear the subtext of this, but the women in the protest, you as a female journalist in the protest, what's that like?
Wow. It's weird because some of the photojournalists feel like a paternal thing for me and they want to protect me, but they also let me go to the front line. So it's very rare, and I don't think, especially the demonstrators, don't expect a woman to be there with them.
It's funny that you say front line because it sounds like a war. Are you seeing this as a war?
It looks like a battlefield, but it's actually a repression because they are fighting sticks and stones with tear gas and little plastic bullets, rubber bullets. So it's not a match. They are just, that's why I call it repression.
If you see like the history behind the protests, you see that these guys call it the resistance. It's like a front line to defend the civil society behind them, because the National Guard and the police doesn't follow the regulations that they need to follow to contain a protest. The first thing that you have to attend is dialogue. You have to talk with with the main character of the manifestation, the protest, and see what the people want, what agreement they can achieve between, and so the people get calm. But the National Guard starts shooting tear gas directly to the protest, rubber bullets, and going on with the tanks. So these guys are working as a shield for the civil society behind them. So it's funny that the government used the footage that show these guys with Molotov bombs, or with the shields, or with rubber, I don't know how to say it, like
rubber bullets. To
throw rocks.
Sure.
And use this footage and say these guys are violent, these guys are terrorists. But if you see the whole picture, you can notice the difference between the force of the National Guard and this small group of guys that are containing these attacks against civil society.
I wanted to share one more view. I just wanted to share one more view because it's especially on the back of what you were saying, Andrea, as a photographer. I wanted to share this view from a freelance photographer in Caracas. Have a listen to Wilfredo.
One of the underreported stories is how do people live out of Caracas? How do people live in the countryside? Especially because the basic products are increasingly hard to find for them. Medicines are really hard to find for them. And the government have the control of everything right now. All the change of distribution of food, medicine is in the hands of the army and the government.
So, Andrea, I know you wanted to get in there, but he says that people should focus outside of Caracas. Andrea?
Yes. I've heard that it's extremely difficult to cover outside of Caracas, especially because there is violence with real bullets in the rest of the country. So imagine if you have to be on the front line, that would actually look like a real battlefield.
Let me just leave you with the thoughts of a general from the People's Guard. We did reach out to the Ministry of Information. They didn't talk to us, but this general spoke to Al Jazeera just over a week ago. Have a listen to his thoughts here.
You can always find fruits and vegetables. What's scarce are products sold by multinationals that have made people think that if they don't consume their products, they'll die.
This is a very different view to many of the views that you've heard from our journalists in our round table. I want to say thank you to Melania, to Andrea, to Aitor as well. Let me leave you with a photograph that caught our attention. That's one of Andrea's photographs. It says here on the laptop, just another day at the office in Venezuela. Thanks for watching, everybody.